Witnesses also saying Israeli tanks and troops had moved into Muwasi, which is a nearby coastal area that the military had previously declared a safe zone for Palestinians. Israeli media said the troops were working to create an informal buffer zone along the border to prevent militants from attacking Israeli communities near Gaza. Now, a military spokesperson said the mission was to clear buildings to create the conditions that would allow the residents of the South to return to their homes. The United States, though, has said that it would oppose any attempt by Israel to shrink Gaza's territory. This also comes as a senior Egyptian official said Israel had proposed a 2-month ceasefire in which the hostages would be freed in exchange for the release of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel, and top Hamas leaders in Gaza would be allowed to relocate to other countries. Now, the official, who was not authorized to speak with the media, said Hamas rejected the proposal, insisting no more hostages will be released until Israel ends its offensive and withdraws from Gaza. Israel's government, though, declined to comment on the talks. We do want to bring in Robert Sanders, a lecturer of national security at the University of New Haven, to provide more perspective. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to meet you.
So I have to imagine that the latest development that 21 Israeli soldiers were killed, that would have a significant impact, I would imagine, on the proposed 2-month ceasefire. What is your take on that?
Well, Israel's a small country, and so the IDF, as its military force, is made up of lots of reservists who get called to active duty, as well as full-time active duty forces. And they have a mandatory requirement to serve a certain period of time at a certain age for men and women in the country. So when you lose that number of troops in one shot, the ripple effects are pretty large through the community because everybody knows everybody in certain senses. Particularly if it's one unit, and that one unit came from one place. If it was, I don't know if it was active or reserve unit. If it was a reserve unit, they all came from one place. It's probably an active duty unit based on what I understand, which means it has people from all over Israel involved in it. So the pain of the deaths is going to be spread throughout the country.
And so what could this mean in terms of Israel's strategy moving forward?
Well, so they're in a rock and a hard place. So they wanted to do this with the least amount of troops on the ground, boot-to-boot combat between Hamas and Israel. And the world said, stop, you're bombing innocent civilians to try to get to the leaders of Hamas and Hamas soldiers, and you're being unsuccessful in doing so. And as a result, Israel, for various reasons, switched that strategy to bring more ground troops into the fight. You can't hold and take territory with bombs from the air or missiles from the ground. You have to bring troops, boots on the ground, have to go in, seize and hold territory. So if that's what Israel is trying to do, they're going to have to continue to do what they're doing, which is put their troops in harm's way to actually meet weapon to weapon with Hamas fighters on the ground.
Now, this seems to be very different from the most recent strategy. Originally, there were a lot of boots on the ground. Then it seemed as they shifted their strategy to more targeted attacks. Now it seems, are they going back to their original strategy?
Well, we'll see how they react from this loss of life, because in addition to the 21 that were lost in the explosion, there was 3 others who were killed at other points in time throughout the war zone. And so 24 dead troops in one day is their largest number of soldiers killed in one day. And so they're absorbing that now. And what that does, I'm not really sure. But, you know, politically, right now, there's a lot of things going on in Israel. There's a bunch of individuals who now are saying, well, we need elections now. We want Netanyahu out now, versus, well, we won't get rid of him until the war's over because we don't want to change leaders of in the middle of a fight. That's not holding true right now in smaller segments. We'll see if that grows. based on his actions or inaction based on citizens' determinations.
Let's now talk about the ceasefire, because Israel potentially considering a 2-month-long ceasefire. That is a significant development. Where does Israel go from here with that potential proposal?
Well, Hamas said it was dead on arrival, so Israel can go wherever they want to with it if it really is dead on arrival. And I suspect Hamas meant it was dead on arrival because, yes, you're going to let our leaders maybe slip away to some other place, but they're going to be targets for the rest of their lives. Mossad, the Israeli secret police, our version of the CIA, acting internally and externally, though, unlike our CIA, will go out and, as it has shown in the past, kill individuals who they believe to be a threat to the state. And they'll do it in creative ways. They've blown up people's phones next to their head when they were holding it. They've shot them from long distance. There's all kinds of different ways they throw car bombs. So these people will never be safe wherever they go. And maybe they should not be safe terrorists. I would prefer that they be tried under the rule of law rather than executed, but that's another story. So whatever goes on in this case, it's not going to end with this. And by the way, Hamas, what do they have to gain from a 2-month lull in the fighting? They're not going to be able to reconstitute enough of their forces and materials in a 2-month period when they have a sea blockade and an air blockade and a ground blockade of materials being smuggled to them. It's only a small amount that's going to make it in 2 months. And at the end of 2 months, the fighting would resume, and they would have no bargaining chips to slow the fighting down. I don't see how they would accept that deal. It takes away all their leverage and gives them no end state. And one of the other things the United States is thinking about, and the Europeans and others, are, well, what's the end state of the war? What's the after effect? How is this area going to be governed? Who's going to run it? You talked a minute ago about the United States objecting to partition of Gaza. Well, if you partition Gaza and you take away the land as a result of this fight, that's potentially a war crime by Israel.
So it really does seem that this is an all or nothing scenario where Hamas, as you said, absolutely not. The ceasefire doesn't bring us any advantage. So it does seem like there will be no ceasefire. I'm interested in getting your take in regards to Israel creating a border around Gaza and the United States saying that they will oppose any situation where there is less of Gaza, so to speak, for the Palestinians. How does that work?
Well, Gaza and the West Bank have been officially determined to be occupied territory by the United Nations. And Israel is the occupier. So as an occupier, Israel has certain duties and responsibilities to the place in which they are occupying. And if they add a border wall, let's think about Berlin at the end of World War II and the Soviets now Russians, but Soviets building the Berlin Wall. And the world's perspective on dividing Berlin from the rest of Germany. In this case, it would be dividing part of Gaza from the rest of Gaza and then Israel taking that part over. Sounds like a problem to me.
Robert, I mean, this is an ever-evolving situation, and again, we see so many developments happening even on an hourly basis. At this point in time, is there anything that you would want viewers to look out for, or any evolutions in this war that you would want to note to our viewers?
Well, one of the things that continues to concern me, and has concerned me from the beginning, is Israel said they would allow civilians not in the fight who are protected under international law to move to safe zones, and they would be unhampered and safe in those zones. Well, that's not true. The facts indicate that that's not true. One of the latest safe zones, Israel said today that they've surrounded that or moving into it with a limited number of troops. I don't know what a limited number of troops looks like, but if it's a safe zone, you're not supposed to be in there in the first place. If that's what you've declared it to be, you're supposed to leave it alone. Hospitals, like the one in Khan Yunis, which is now surrounded, if it is a haven for Hamas activity, it may lose its legitimate protection as a hospital. But Israel's going to have to show us proof of that. And as yet, I have not seen that. All I have seen is that they have alleged these things about this particular hospital, and they have to do it with every hospital, because every hospital has the same protection. And then be able to then go in and limited strike to remove the threat. The whole hospital can't be demolished and removed as an entity. That clearly also may be a violation of international law and laws of armed conflict. I continue to be concerned about that. I continue to be concerned about pushing what's left of the population, 2 million, into an area that you say is safe, and then you continue to attack in and around that area. And the talk of division of Gaza and post-conflict occupation, different occupation than the one that existed. The occupation that existed before was a surrounding. This occupation appears to be a taking.
And let's talk about the Palestinians, because you were mentioning that there was an area in Gaza that is set aside, supposed to be a safe zone, so to speak, for Palestinians. But the question is, where do they go from here? Because again, if Gaza continues to be decimated by the fighting, there's really not much to go back to.
So if you go to the west, you're in the ocean. If you go to the south, you're in Egypt. And if you go to the west, you go into Israel proper. None of those directions work. And even if you go to the northwest, you're still going into Israel proper, which Israel has bombed and obliterated. So if you then say, all right, you can now go home, what home? The infrastructure in the north is essentially gone. And as Israel moves through central Gaza and through the south, into the south, the infrastructure there is being destroyed as well. So 2 million people with no food, no housing, no water, no electricity, and under constant attack. It seems to me that Israel has brought itself, although they were the ones who were attacked, their response to the attack is what is putting them here. The response to the attack, with 25,000+ Palestinians who weren't in the fight dead. Maybe about 8,000 of them are actually Palestinian fighters. And they are and continue to be a legitimate target for Israel. But you can't do that over the bloody bodies of the women, children of Palestine. The international community is looking at it in many different ways. Some of them, in my area of expertise, legally finding Israel may be lawfully charged under the state versus state doctrines from the International Court of Justice, or the state versus international community and state versus individuals and entities under the International Criminal Court. All of those entities are looking at Israel's activities right now, and in the long run, it's a very long run for the court. You may find that all of these actions by Israel will be criminalized.
Let's talk about post-war. Hamas is eliminated. Again, there is this massive humanitarian crisis. Who shoulders the responsibility for the Palestinian people? Is it international? Is this an international crisis then?
Well, it has to be an international crisis because there's no individual state that could take this on. But just like after World War II, the Allies went in and rebuilt Germany and Japan, I think it is incumbent upon the state of Israel to be responsible financially to pay for some of the reconstruction of Gaza that they've destroyed. Remember, 25,000+ people have killed. Most of them, the vast majority of them, were civilians. And the vast majority of the infrastructure that was destroyed was civilian housing, businesses, civilian community entities, not military objectives and objects. So I think Israel owes a debt, financial debt, even though they were initially the ones attacked. Their response leaves a financial debt, in my mind, to the Palestinian people. Now, the rest of the world is also going to be on the hook for this, because the rest of the world has fallen in lockstep, at least in the West, in support of Israel and their rightful use of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. But afterwards, there's another part of the UN Charter which says that you're supposed to bring back the status quo, not take it in another direction, i.e. you don't take land and keep it. So the Israelis have to give it back, and the rest of the world is going to have to help the Palestinians reconstruct their lives.
Before we head to a break, is there anything else that you would like to let our viewers know in regards to what to anticipate potentially as we continue to follow this ongoing war?
Well, I inadvertently said the Houthis a moment ago, and so that takes us to the stretch. What's the stretch from this conflict? So we have the Houthis saying that they're targeting shipping in the water surrounding Yemen because that shipping is supporting and going to Israel. You have the United States and Britain and others responding to those attacks on commercial ships, and now a couple of times on U.S. naval vessels who are able to defend themselves well against this. And the response is missiles from ships, subs, and aircraft from aircraft carriers attacking those sites. You have attacks on U.S. troops on the ground in Iraq and U.S. military response. You have an Israeli assassination taking one of the players off the battlefield in Syria. A lot of different moving pieces, a lot of them with a backdrop of Hamas and Israel. We need to watch those closely as well, because those escalations are direct combat action by U.S. forces and our closest allies, the Brits.
All right, Robert Sanders with the University of New Haven. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
You're welcome. Have a good day.